Quebec Premier François Legault is urging the Prime Minister to slow the influx of asylum seekers entering his province. Unfortunately, we are very close to the breaking point due to the excessive number of asylum seekers arriving in Quebec month after month. The situation has become unbearable, the Premier says. Legault also wants Ottawa to reimburse the Quebec government for money spent supporting those already arrived. That total, $470 million for 2021 and 2022. Well, the Mayor of Canada's biggest city is sympathetic to Legault's requests.
I understand the breaking point piece because we are doing our best. We are doing what we can under this financial strain. But do we want to close the doors to refugees? No, because I believe this is a city, a country that are built by newcomers.
All right, we're going to bring in the power panel on this. Jonathan Kalis is a former Quebec advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, now senior director at Macmillan Vantage. James Moore is a senior advisor at Dentons and a former Conservative cabinet minister. Andrew Thompson is a former Saskatchewan NDP cabinet minister, now chief of government relations at the University of Toronto. And Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. Happy Thursday, gang. Jonathan, let's start with you, as you are in Quebec, where the latest entry into this is happening. It's politically, it's an interesting squeeze the Liberals find themselves in that two of their biggest power bases, they've got people upset with their handling of the immigration system. What do you make of this move by François Legault?
I'm kind of having a deja vu because I once upon a time worked for the Minister of Border Security, and we were dealing with these issues. That office was set up in many ways because there were serious challenges at Roxham Road. So we dealt with that. We had to work with Quebec and find a solution. At the time, there was $250 million. I think that was 2017 and 18 is compensation. So we've been down this road before. It's kind of like, we solved the Roxham Road. That was the idea. And now people are landing at the airport making asylum claims. So it's sort of been displaced, but the problem remains the same. The problem is a worldwide problem of migration. That's number one. Number two, no one has any quick fixes because there'll continue to be a migration problem. It's in the States, it's in Europe, it's all Western countries are dealing with this. And so we need to look at it from big picture and have mature, responsible conversations about it. I didn't find anything egregious in François Legault's letter. There have been moments where everybody has taken this sort of to the limit of a populist tone. But the bottom line is, there's a problem, and we need to work together on solutions. When Olivia Chow and François Legault are making similar arguments, it's a bigger problem, and so we need to figure out what the solutions are. I look back to 2009 till about 2016 when Mexicans were required to have visas to enter the country. James can talk to that because that was a decision that was made. There was a serious problem in those years. It was addressed. For different reasons, the visas were removed. It improved relationships with Mexico, but caused other problems. So there's always a cause and effect and then unintended consequences.
Yeah, James, as Jonathan pointed out, nothing super egregious or accusatory there from the Premier of Quebec, and you've seen the responses coming back from the federal government. The Prime Minister said they'd be there to share the cost, share the burden, and Dominic LeBlanc, the Public Safety Minister, putting out a statement outlining the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars the feds have given Quebec on this. Politically, though, the challenge this presents for Legault in Quebec and for the Prime Minister in his power bases of Quebec and Toronto.
Yeah, look, Premier Legault is exactly right, and I think it's important to understand the scale of the challenge that Quebec is facing. It's north of 60,000 people, which is to say basically the entire city of Drummondville or Granby plus has just been dropped into the province of Quebec in one calendar year of just asylum seekers. This is above normal inflows of immigration. This is above temporary foreign workers. This is above, other streams of migration and immigration into the province of Quebec. So this is a massive challenge with no corresponding sources of revenue. And I have to say, politically, I think what was just said was important. Is that the fact that these criticisms are coming from the province of Quebec, coming from the mayor of Toronto, a former NDP member of Parliament, whose voice is, I think, respected on immigration issues, certainly from the left. I think is good. In other parts of the world, the populist voices from kind of dark places are taking over this debate and pushing it in a very unhelpful way. But I think tick-tock, we need to move forward on the policy of this and find ways in order to make sure that the Canadian tolerance for immigration and migration stays sound and solid. And when you start talking about the conversations we've had in this show about the pressures that are happening on emergency rooms, on the dynamics of inflation, on housing, and now on asylum seekers. And so people are going to start standing up and making noise and demanding action. And so far, it's been reasonable and it's been thoughtful, but it's incumbent on the government of Canada to make sure that they're working with provinces to ensure that we're dealing with these stresses effectively. Because if you're not, the public is going to have very short patience for this.
Yeah, and Andrew, it's not just a cost-sharing discussion, right, between different levels of government. We spoke with Tim Richter earlier this week on the show. He's the CEO of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. He's also going to be speaking to the federal cabinet in Montreal next week. And he referenced the large number of asylum seekers as not just putting pressure on the shelter system, but also on low-cost housing and sort of exacerbating all of these shortages. So there's a knock-on effect to these sorts of challenges that the governments, as James pointed out, have to find a way to deal with reasonably and seriously.
Yeah, the refugee situation is a significant one, but is one that Canada needs to address. I mean, to James's point, we had about 140,000 refugees and asylum seekers come to the country last year. Unlike the family reunification class or people who are coming here for economic reasons and jobs, this is a group that really has no resources available to them, and we don't get to pick and choose where they come from. Now, Canada's problem is actually relatively small when you look at the millions that Germany's absorbed, the million that Turkey's absorbed, the million that Poland has absorbed in the last year. And we seem unable to, or incapable, or unwilling to be able to put up the resources to support 140,000. Now, those 140,000, to James's point, are landing in really two cities. They're landing in Toronto and they're landing in Montreal. And figuring out how we take the strain off of the social service systems that have really been designed for a local population is what's missing. So, we can talk about it not being jurisdictional, but it's the federal government that's the signatory to the agreements. The responsibility of a country to provide access to asylum seekers and refugees is a federal one. It is unreasonable, I think, to accept that provinces that are really designed to deal with local populations are going to be able to ramp up without additional resources to meet the needs of that very specific population that is very, frankly, hard done by.
Yeah, Shachi, it's kind of too early to tell, I think, what the ripple effects of all of this will be in Quebec, because it's only just happened today. But in Toronto, we're seeing Liberal MPs pushing back against Olivia Chow, for tying this issue to the potential of a tax hike. There is a political component to this that is uncertain here, it seems, at the federal level.
Well, at the federal level, this is the result of years, if not decades, of a lack of anticipation and sleepwalking around not only policy, but also the way, really just the operationalization of it. I worked summers as a student customs officer in university. People claim asylum at airports. There has to be not only a situation for federal officials to take those in, whether it's somebody at the border or in a different way, and then also deal with the very long timelines involved in sorting through the merits of many of these asylum claims. Asylum seekers can be here, for months, years at a time, and we just federally have not come up with a plan to say, okay, these folks are going to be here for a significant amount of time. What is the plan to house them? What is the plan to care for them beyond devolving things down to the municipal level, the provincial level, which is why you see the Mayor of Toronto and the Premier of Quebec pushing back at this point. I want to circle back, too, to the conversations around what it does to the broader sense of public opinion when it comes to the issue of migration, immigration. We know from polling in the past that when people start seeing the pictures of asylum seekers or others on the street without adequate housing, without those situations, immediately the brain goes to that is representative of the vast majority of immigration. You then get into a much harder, flintier anti-immigration sentiment broadly, because what they don't see are the economic migrants who are coming job ready, work ready, with places to live. That's invisible to them. This is what's visible possible, and this is what has the potential to turn the needle in the wrong way against migration altogether. I'm not talking about how many is too many, but even the concept of it.
Okay, Jonathan, I'm gonna pivot a little bit here. I'm gonna spring something on you, so my apologies in advance, and I'll front load it with enough. This obviously ties into the housing challenges that are out there, and there's a little drama playing out on social media in Quebec that I wanted to ask you about between Pierre Poilievre, the mayor of Montreal, and the mayor of Quebec City. Pierre Poilievre has called them incompetent because of declining housing constructions. He tweeted out saying that a massive drop-off in construction in Quebec, while Trudeau's giving billions to the incompetent mayors Bruno Marchand of Quebec City and Valérie Plante of Montreal, who get in the way of construction sites. Now they are lashing back, saying this is disrespectful and shows you what kind of a prime minister Mr. Poilievre would be. Walk me through the politics of this. Is it good politics for Pierre Poilievre to be attacking the mayors of the two largest cities in Quebec like this? Help me understand it.
There is a method to the madness, and I'm not sure I like it or respect it, but Pierre Poilievre knows he's not going to win seats in Montreal. And Valérie Plante's not very popular in Montreal, and so taking shots at her is cheap but easy, because people outside of Montreal really don't like Valérie Plante, whether they live here or not. They just don't like her. It's a urban-rural divide. It's kind of a way to ingratiate yourself in more rural parts of Quebec, where Pierre Poilievre does have opportunities to pick up seats. In Quebec City, there's a real divide. You have a very progressive mayor in Bruno Marchand in Quebec City that's popular in certain segments, places where the Bloc or the Liberals have seats, but in the parts of Quebec City, and especially the suburbs where they don't like Marchand, they would like a third link across the St. Lawrence. This is an opportunity to score some points where they're not popular. And of course, housing is an issue. It's an issue across the country. It's certainly an issue in larger cities. So if you can point fingers and say this is whose fault it is, there's a lack of affordable housing in Montreal, for sure. And in Quebec City, that problem is growing as well.
Okay. The federal money for housing, though, runs through the provincial government in Quebec. It's different than the other jurisdictions. Just an important point there. But James, on that, the triangulation...
You know that, but the people that Pierre Poilievre is talking to don't necessarily make that distinction. And so to make the point,
right,
it still scores the points.
Right. So James, on that, the triangulation that Jonathan played out, right? Go after this person to grow here. Good politics, but is it the right way for a prime minister in waiting to do this? I mean, is there a potential risk of backlash here on this one?
I mean, I don't know. What I can say about Pierre in the years that I've known him is that he's a measure twice, measure three times, cut once, deliberative person who does proper consultation before he makes a move. This stuff isn't haphazard. It's not temperamental. It's thoughtful. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think there is certainly a constituency within the province of Quebec, and I think it exists elsewhere, but I think it is an acute one in the province of Quebec, who are a bit fed up with elite accommodation, le clic du plateau, and sort of progressive voices. If you know there's a group of people who will never vote for you, and there's a group of people who feel left out because there's a consensus opinion accommodation conversation going on, and people are feeling left out, then there's an audience of there. By the way, that's healthy populism. It gets stigmatized from time to time, but people on the left do it, people on the right do it. But there's a group of people who feel left out, who are energized to get involved and who are fed up. Having people in political office say, I can be a solution to your problems, let me appeal to you in my way. That's how democracy is supposed to work. And it may not be, you know, the flavor of ice cream that everybody wants, but I think it's a flavor of ice cream that should be in the marketplace, and let voters decide what they want. And I think Pierre is offering something different from sort of status quo consensus opinion that exists amongst urban elites, not only in Quebec but elsewhere in the country. I think it's a healthy thing.